Shana Tova.
Shana Tova.
My dryer broke a couple of weeks ago. I was doing loads of laundry in between high holiday prep and sermon writing. I was 12 years old, which the way they make appliances these days far exceeds its lifespan, and it gave out. Not the biggest of deals, but in the midst of high holiday prep, frustrating nonetheless. But then at Home Depot, I found myself arguing with a sales representative about how quickly it could be delivered. And again on the drive home, honking with road rage when someone on Springfield Avenue cut me off. I was fuming. I needed to take a walk outside to calm down, take time for myself on my porch. And when the dryer was finally delivered, the delivery team was unable to initially install it because, as many of you know, old houses have new problems. And I lost my cool again. I spent hours on the phone with a customer service representative just to yell at someone. My wife had to remind me that it really wasn't a big deal. We could drop our clothes off at the laundromat for the time being. I've had a short fuse with my children. Sometimes I feel like they constantly test me to see what they could get away with. I found that I have less patience in conversations. I've been working hard to control my feelings and emotions, but I found myself being so angry so much of the time. As a kid, I used to have a temper. Every time I call my parents and share a parenting challenge I'm having, they laugh and quickly remind me of that and the challenge that I was. I evolved, found coping mechanisms, grew out of that, or so I thought. But these days, I find myself so agitated. There's so much to be angry at in the world. We're taught that righteous indignation is necessary when we see injustice, sure, but it's also emotionally exhausting. Personally, for myself, I've been angry since October 7th, almost 2 years. But I'm upset at so much more in this world. As my middle schooler likes to say, I tend to crash out. That's middle school lingo for being mad, I'm told. I'm upset that the world didn't and doesn't seem to care about those still held in captivity to be brought home, something that I pray for daily. And that it seems Benjamin Netanyahu at times and his government doesn't care either. I'm upset at what I see as a reality of war that so many hope and pray to end. I'm upset at the conditions that I see because of that war. I'm upset that we live in a world where so many are quick to blame Israel for anything and everything. And I'm upset that we are fearful to acknowledge when Israel is to blame. I'm upset that when you deal with a terrorist group like Hamas, who's willing to and wants to kill Jews and Israelis and their own people, what do? Not the reality that Israelis live in every day with sirens and making sure there's a bomb shelter in every apartment. And that my optimistic dream of peace, something that I was taught as a child, seems dead. That there aren't leaders to support that dream. And that anti-Semitism is increasingly rampant in the world, often masked as anti-Zionism. And that I feel less comfortable walking around with a kippah on my head, being openly Jewish. I'm upset about a lot of things. And I'm angry that we seem to live in a police state here in this country, where masked, plainclothed men without badges or IDs are rounding people up on the streets, even in our own towns, without due process, without reason at all, because I'm angry because people, individuals within our own community are bullied and having their rights stripped away because of their gender identity. And I'm upset because we began this school year, like every other school year, with another tragic school shooting, and live in a society where we accept that when we hug our children goodbye and send them on the bus, we wonder if they'll come home to us safely. A country who worships assault rifles like avodah zarah. And angry because people shoot at others when they find their words offensive, instead of debating and being in conversation with them. Or because government officials question vaccine efficacy and heads of the very institutions that are meant to prevent widespread disease and pandemics are fired because they believe in science. Or because elected officials censor and silence others, from broadcaster to late night host who disagrees with them. Suffice to say, there's a lot to be angry about. Anger is a part of the human experience. In just a matter of weeks, at the end of the holiday season, we'll conclude the reading of the Torah. And the Torah tells us that never again did there arise a prophet like Moses. And yet, among the many reasons why Moses didn't enter the promised land was because he lost his temper. In Parshat Hukat, Moses hits a rock to provide water for the Israelites rather than speaking to it as God had commanded. But that wasn't the problem. After hitting the rock, he screams at the people he's meant to serve, Shimuna Hamorim. Listen up, you imbeciles. Even the greatest prophet of Israel had an anger problem. And losing your cool isn't even limited to the human experience. Upon seeing the Israelites' creation of a golden calf only months after God had freed them from 400 years of slavery in Egypt, God shows contempt, a common occurrence in our early biblical relationship, saying, I see that this is a stiff-necked people. Now let me be, that my anger may blaze forth against them so I can destroy them. It was only Moses' intervention that prevented potentially another Noah's Ark-like situation. So much for this holy covenant. But by revealing the anger of our biblical patriarchs and matriarchs, and even God's divine frustration, the Torah is doing more than simply giving us permission to feel angry. It reveals that such feelings are normal. And we just feel a lot of it at this moment. I know that you are angry too. I know this because I've been on the receiving end of that anger. This is not intended to be a woe is me sermon, so I hope you won't take it that way. But I've received emails and phone calls from many of you over the past several years, upset at the Torah I've taught, the Torah I've not taught, the words said and those left unspoken. Some in this room have referred to me as a right-wing supporter of human rights violations who lacks moral clarity. Others have suggested that I'm too political and just a plant and mouthpiece for the DNC. Some have called me words that I won't repeat on the bima. Others are still gracious enough to refer to me as Rabbi. My teacher in rabbinical school suggested that if the Torah you teach isn't making someone angry, then you aren't teaching Torah at all. But he also reminded us, you want to make sure that it's not always the same people who you are making angry. Well, in Israel this past December, with members of the Rabbinical Assembly speaking to colleagues, I came to realize I was far from alone and being the sole recipient of people's indignation. Studying Torah together with a group of hundreds of rabbis from across the world, I came to an important realization when looking at chapter 32 of the book of Bereshit, the book of Genesis. We learn of Jacob's fear in reuniting with his brother Esau. He had reason to be fearful, for he had bamboozled Esau into selling his birthrights and deceived his father in order to receive the blessing reserved for his brother. In sending his family ahead of him, the text says that he arose, taking his wives and maidservants, his 11 sons, v'ya'avor et ma'avor yavok. And they crossed the Yavok crossing. He then sent across all of his possessions, but the following verse reveals, V'vater Yaakov levado, that Jacob was left alone on the other side of the river to wrestle with the angel of God. Midrash asks, how is it possible that the Torah tells us that Jacob crossed the river with his family and also remained on the other side of the banks all alone? Was it simply that he made a round trip? A selfless act that as a parent and a spouse we regularly do for those that we love. He dropped his family off and then returned to be alone. Bereshit Rabbah explains that Jacob didn't actually cross the river. But when the text says, V'yavor et ma'avor yavok, it means rather that they used him to cross the river. Imagine him lying on his back and having his family walk all over him in order to get them to where they needed to go. And then after being walked all over, Jacob, literally and metaphorically, V'vater Yaakov levado, he was left alone. Jacob and his family were traveling to destinations unknown with Esau, who sought vengeance, and 400 soldiers waiting for him on the other side. They were scared, they were fearful, they were angry. And Jacob felt his family's anger and his brother's anger, absorb their feelings to get to where they desired to be, even if that meant being alone in the process. Sitting on the receiving end of some of that anger, I've come to the conclusion, maybe it's not the worst thing. Don't get me wrong, I, like anyone else, don't want someone to be upset at them. But we tend to get upset at those who will love us no matter what. Our family, our closest friends. And if Bethel is our safe space, our home away from home, literally Beit El, house of God, the house where we see the godliness in one another, then it should be a place maybe where we could blow off steam. Maybe it's a way that we say how comfortable we are, how at home we are. It's like sometimes after a long day at work, or with our children not listening to us, my wife and I may get upset at each other. And after the fact, we clarify, I'm not mad at you, I'm mad at the situation. But because we love each other, we can hold each other's feelings. I'm happy to hold your feelings as well. But like Jacob experienced, there's an emotional and physical price we pay when doing so. I worry even more about the anger that we have experienced in this community towards one another. The emotions expressed towards those in this room, by those in this room, that can create fissures within community. We've done much work, and we plan on doing more with organizations like Resetting the Table, for the sake of argument, to help members of our community be in conversation with each other, even when we disagree. But we need to be willing to be in conversation like Hillel and Shammai as chavruta, to challenge, to teach, but never to convince. Not picketing if we disagree, but being in conversation. We need to be willing to sit at the table with each other, with those who have different opinions, because sitting at the table with one another, just as we literally do during Kiddush and celebrating together, is what makes community community. Earlier this month, Stephen Freeman reflected on What he feared were fissures within the larger American Jewish community. Reflecting on the 25th anniversary of the publication of his book, Jew vs. Jew, The Struggle for the Soul of American Jewry, he thought back to a generation ago when he wrote about different vignettes where each chapter was a story unto itself about divisions within the Jewish community, orthodoxy and liberalism, tradition and change, assimilation, etc. And 25 years later, Friedman acknowledged that the divisions within communities seem starker than ever. And that's playing out in how we react to one another, a so-called moral black and white, where he says we entrench ourselves in our corners. He claimed that outside of ritual observance, 3 pillars sustained Jewish identity: Holocaust memory, fighting anti-Semitism, and attachment to Israel. In Friedman's words, one of those legs has now been shattered and the others are under stress. But he also said that some of the fighting within communities is representative of the internal fighting one experiences. An internal debate and disagreement with oneself, a dichotomy of the soul. When we feel at odds with ourselves, a tension, not just with others. And that is the cause of such anger. In the world of psychology, anger is defined as a secondary emotion. We need to understand the root cause of it, for ultimately it masks our underlying sentiments. I've come to realize that long list that I shared earlier, that which has caused me and causes me to lose my patience and set me off, isn't really because I'm angry. Rather, anger masks my fear, my sadness, my disappointment, my loneliness. I'm scared about the future and often feel helpless, understanding that there's so much beyond my control. Getting to the root cause of what we are feeling, make sure we aren't consumed by it, like the burning bush itself. This is the season, the new year, meant to be filled with celebration, new beginnings, new opportunities. So let us use this moment as a new opportunity to develop coping mechanisms, to express ourselves differently, so that we aren't always seemingly full of displeasure and frustration. A few recommendations of how I channel that anger that I feel that I'm experiencing. For me, the first is physical activity. It stimulates the release of endorphins in the brain, giving you a natural high and more energy, essential, considering exhaustion is a key catalyst to anger. Go to the gym. Go for a walk around the block. Play a game of pickleball. Run on the reservation. Do yoga. Stare at a screen while you're on the Peloton. In our lives in 2025, we tend to be more idle and inactive than the human experience ever before. Physical activity goes a long way. It's like an aerobic tashlich. It allows us to release what we're feeling. It gives us a sense of relief. I've always had a daily prayer practice and wrap to fill in each day. However, several years ago during COVID, I incorporated meditation into my routine. Meditation allows me to control my breathing, feel God all around me and within me. It allows me to feel the divine spark inside me and see God's holiness in this world. I always made time to daven, be it with a minyan or quickly on my own. But meditation, I experienced a different connection to God, an inner peace. I began to see God in everything, and in turn, was able to experience more beauty in this world. In a world that constantly felt dark, a world that made me want to cry or yell or scream, I began to feel joy. I began to feel light. Meditation centers us as an ultimate act of kavanah without needing to know Hebrew or certain melodies or rely on the fixed liturgy of tradition. Sometimes allowing ourselves to speak with God allows us to be angry with God, and in turn releases us from those emotions. Talk to someone, anyone. We keep too much inside and let it boil over. I'm not just recommending this because my wife's a therapist. It's because I think it's essential for our mental health that we have someone to talk to. One of my teachers taught that rabbis need rabbis too. Talking to someone, knowing that there's someone listening is essential, even if they aren't a trained professional. And maybe they aren't going to agree with you, because that's not the goal. It's not about convincing them why you are right, but instead knowing someone is listening, and in turn, knowing you aren't alone. Think twice about what you say or do. The Mishnah Berurah reminds us that we must think twice before speaking or acting, as words and actions have profound consequences. In a world where we expect rapid response, where everything is breaking news shared directly on our social media platforms, and we feel the need to instantly respond to a text or to a tweet, informing the world what we are feeling or doing at any given moment, we need to take the time to pause more. Often, our quick, knee-jerk reactions and responses do not calm us down. Instead, they do the opposite and add more fuel to the fire. Take a break and take a breath before we speak and act. And finally, maybe most pertinent to this moment, forgive. We may not be able to forgive the injustices that we see or feel all around us, but often our frustration about those things we cannot control lead us being irrationally incensed about smaller things. Forgiving others and forgiving ourselves frees us from the heavy burden we all tend to carry. In this season of renewal, where we each ask God for a clean slate, we can give that to others. So if I failed you in any way, I ask for your forgiveness, and I hope you'll forgive me. We can lighten our load when we're able to forgive each other. In doing so, we create more space for peace, for compassion, for understanding. During the 7 weeks between Tisha B'Av and Rosh Hashanah, this 7-week period we've just completed, we have 7 special haftarot that we read, haftarot of comfort and consolation, to bring us back from the lowest place of mourning on Tisha B'Av to the highest of highs at this moment being written in the book of life. Among these haftarot, we read in chapter 54 of the book of Isaiah, the prophet speaking for God. In slight anger, I hid my face from you, but with everlasting kindness, I take you back in love. There's so much to be angry about in the world. I know because I feel it, I experience it, and still try to live a life of meaning and purpose, even with that anger. But misplaced or misdirected anger isn't healthy. It doesn't help us find beauty and meaning and purpose. So let us find ways in this new year to release what we are feeling, to get to the true root of what is causing that feeling, so that in the season of renewal and return, we can return to each other, return to ourselves, and return to God in love. Amen.